just to take a step back, some people might be listening that don't even know what NLP is, which is actually neuro-linguistic programming. Can you... Yeah, tick. You're welcome.
You passed your course. Well done.
Yeah. Woo! I think the beautiful thing I love about Calvin and his teachings is it focuses on coupling that science and that spirituality as well. And NLP to me is that really beautiful neuroscience understanding of how your body's actually working on a biochemical level. And then it's really about coupling that with energy and law of attraction and mindset. So can you chat to me a little bit about like what NLP actually is and how you got involved? Because I know your journey was very different.
Yeah, it's a bit crazy. So I guess the first thing I'd say is the flavor, if you will, of NLP that you've done with us, Crystal, is not what most people would consider to be just pure NLP. So pure NLP is quite vanilla, it's quite bland, it's quite stale, for want of a better choice. Well, it's very effective, but we teach very much like a hybrid mix today. We've really sort of, picked the very best tools from a variety of modalities into our program. So a lot of the stuff that we've taught you or we've been working through with you, obviously it's based in NLP, but it's very different. So let me give you the backstory and I'll tell you how we came to be here. So NLP was created in the very late 60s, early 70s. By two gentlemen, Dr. Grindler and Richard Bandler. And effectively, these two gentlemen were in the United States, and they were studying computer science at the time and psychology. And I'm obviously paraphrasing the story a little bit, but effectively they said, look, the world of computers and the world of personal computing had just come about. And effectively, there's sort of 0 and 1s. We can program a computer, much like you would program the software of your iPhone or of a Samsung. And so if we can program a computer, how can we program the mind? Well, what is it that allows some people to achieve success and other people have got, major breakdowns, depression, anxiety, phobias, which is, if you think about it from an extreme perspective, you go, why is it some person's just absolutely terrified of just the point where they're going to convulsions and some people don't have an issue? So it's like, is there a glitch in the computer code, so to speak? So this led them down a pathway of just almost like a thought experiment of understanding what were the differences that made the difference. And what they ended up looking at was, rather than looking at a variety of different patients to try and find the answer, they looked at a few leading psychologists, psychotherapists, healers, if you will, to see what were the differences that made the difference. If they could try and identify the similarities across people. They looked at a gentleman called Dr. Milton Erickson, who's a world famous hypnotherapist, and he would create change and transformation for people by putting them into a trance, by creating these unusual stories that got sort of people lost on tangents, but it allowed them to dissociate from their problems, and then he would embed meaning in hypnotic language patterns into the conversations. And in fact, at that time, hypnotherapy was outlawed as like a therapeutic modality, but he was so good that the American Board of Psychology said, look, if we can't beat him, we may as well join him. And they embraced him and they embraced hypnotherapy. There was a gentleman called Fritz Perls, who was a Gestalt therapist. He pioneered Gestalt therapy, which today would be referred to as timeline therapy from Tad James. But effectively, it's utilizing, the experiences of your life, and rather than trying to solve a moment in this moment, try and identify the very first time you experienced it and then reworking it from there. And so that was a tool and technique that was used. And then they finally looked at a leading family therapist called Virginia Satir, and she was responsible for creating a lot of family-based constellation therapies, but also looking deeply as well at communication and how couples often tend to communicate at different levels. We know that there's some people are extroverted, introverted, some people are big picture, some people are detailed. She found that couples often missed each other because they were talking at different levels. So what they discovered in those three people was actually there's a lot of different ways to create change. And what they started to put together was almost like a toolbox, if you will, or a tool belt of different tools that they had modeled from these men and women. And one of the key pillars of NLP is modeling. And so NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is obviously, the name says it all, right? Neuro being the brain, linguistics being the language of the brain, and programming being programming in the way that you would program a computer or a phone. So the way that I communicate that sciencey stuff or the history, if you're familiar with an iPhone, you've obviously got the hardware, right? You upgrade the hardware every couple of years, but in our case, we've only got one set of that hardware, the body and the mind, right? That's it. We can obviously improve it, but that's the software that we're improving. So every couple of days, you get a software update on Apple or on Samsung because there's some bug in the system, there's some program that's not working properly, it crashes. There's just issues as people use the program. So I want you to think about any problems or challenges you've got in your life if you're listening to this. not as problems with you, but rather problems with your operating system. And we can install effectively upgrades to that software by understanding the patterns and the strategies and then changing them. So today, fast forward from like early 70s. And and then what ended up happening was in the 80s, Tony Robbins comes along. He learns NLP from those two gentlemen. He then changes it and creates his own flavor of things. And then my mentor, Chris Howard, learns in that process as well. And then I get the opportunity, 2013. Long story short, I moved to Bali to work for a guy I'd never met before to learn this stuff, because I knew that if I learn how to make change for people, my strategy as a coach before that point, Crystal, was just raw inspiration, right? Like if someone had a problem, I would just almost like beat them over the head with positivity in the hope that they'd change. And
And
that does work.
You can feel
Yeah.
that passion and that flavor. Sometimes I'll be listening to the recordings of the calls, and I'll put you up a couple speeds as well. And people walk into my flat and they're like, "Whoa!" And you can just feel that energy. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, that it works, but there's some collateral damage to that strategy, right? It's like trying to start a car by using a sledgehammer. It can work. It's just not really recommended.
No.
So I moved to Bali to work for a guy I'd never met before. And I worked for him for free for 6 months to learn this stuff. And then I come back and start my own business. And NLP is divided into sort of two main bodies of work. You've got your practitioner level tools, and then you've got a master's of NLP. And in the practitioner level, there is the equivalent of about 50 different tools that have been developed over a lifetime. And then in the masters, you've got about a dozen. We sort of hand select the best ones. And then we also combine that with some really cutting edge coaching and sort of positive psychology tools in terms of the work that we do today. So it's not a pure blood NLP training just because it's not as effective as it was in the 60s. I mean, the world of neuroscience has improved so dramatically. There's so much new information and new strategies today that are cutting edge in the way that NLP was back then. We still teach, obviously, NLP. We still do that training, but it's really more of a hybrid model today, or a fusion model, if you will, than what it was in the beginning.